Hi, my name is Dmitry and I'm the developer of InfraNodus, a visual AI text analysis tool that you see right now on your screen. InfraNodus helps you find the gaps in any text or in your thinking and then bridge those gaps to generate new ideas and insights. Let me show you how InfraNodus works so you can apply it to your own ideas. Let me begin from demonstrating how InfraNodus can be useful for you. For example, here I have my own text that I wrote. It's not finished. It's a topic I'm thinking about. And InfraNodus allows me to visualize this as a graph so that I can see the main ideas inside and how they relate to one another. It's great to get a direct visual overview of what you're thinking about. It can also identify the main topics inside and let me zoom into those topics to see if I'm covering the territory that I wanted to cover with my thinking or with my text. And most importantly, I can also identify the structural gaps. So the ideas or the topics that could be better connected, and then use the built-in AI to generate some interesting insights, questions that would bridge them in new ways and help me develop this discourse further. So this is how I would use it for my own texts. But also InfraNodus can analyze the already existing discourse. For example, I can go into the Study Market app and type in a search query I'm interested in. So let's say I want to see what people are thinking about when they think of freedom, like what they actually write about when they're thinking about this. And I will choose that I want to analyze it in English and in the USA, for instance. I can really choose the territory and the language in which I want to analyze stuff. And then it will show me the graph of the top 40 Google search results for this topic. So I can see that when people are talking about freedom online, they're talking about banks, online, equity, and so on. So it's a lot of it is about money. And maybe this is a good feedback for me if I'm writing about this topic, that in fact the content that already exists is about money, so I could kind of position myself differently to fit into this discourse, and usually I would look for the gaps to fit in. So this is why the graph is so useful, because you can sort of see the structure of the public discourse and identify where in this gap you want to fit in or how you want to cover this territory that already exists. And in the same way, you can also analyze what people are thinking when they search for something. So for example, here I can type in freedom, and then I will go to informational demand, and here I choose the related search queries app. And what happens here is that InfraNodus will import the search queries that people use when they search for freedom to show me what is on their mind when they're searching for it. So this is how it can be used. You can see what people are finding. So that's the informational supply, what exists out there, what they're searching for. That's the informational demand. And that allows you to have a better understanding of what exists out there and how you can develop it further. First of all, I'll show you the logic behind InfraNodus. InfraNodus visualizes any text as a network where the concepts are the nodes and the co-occurrences are the connections between them. Based on this approach, we build a network graph where we identify the nodes or the concepts with the highest influence or highest betweenness centrality, to use the network science terms, and also the clusters of nodes that belong together. And they have the same color here and are aligned closer to each other on the graph using the Force Atlas layout algorithm and also community detection algorithms. In fact, if you ever want to read about the science behind it, you can always click on a question mark next to each item in the analytics panel, and you will understand how it works and also have the references to the relevant scientific papers. A really easy way to think about this is to use a social network analogy. Imagine that words are like people, and those words will have interactions that they like to sort of hang out together. So, for instance, in this text, if the concept habitual and pattern appear in the same context, as you can see when I click them on the graph, I select them and I can see where they appear together. If they like to hang out together, they will be shown closer to each other on the graph. And the combinations of words or the groups of words that like to hang out a lot in the context of this particular text, they will have the same color and they will be also closer to each other and be part of the same topical cluster. Like for instance here, habitual pattern is part of that green cluster here. And these are the words that like to hang out in the context of this particular text. And I want to point out also how it's different from vector representations, which I used in AI, because when you think about how AI represents information, it does it also in a multidimensional space and also based on a similar principle, but it has a general understanding of which words in general appear in the same context. So it will not have this understanding about your particular text, but in this case, we're actually sort of amplifying the importance of co-occurrences in this particular text that you're analyzing, which allows us to build a separate structure for each specific text and identify the main topics and gaps exactly for this very text, because we sort of understand the social network of this particular text. We're not saying that normally habitual will appear, for example, with ability. No, in this text, they're far from each other. A normal AI representation would sort of force them together because it would think, okay, they appear often together, so maybe they should be connected. But in this case, they're not. And this is why we can also use these representations to identify specifics about each text and see how we can develop it further in an interesting way that will go beyond the generic representation of ideas. Another advantage of using the graph is the ability to remove the nodes that you don't find relevant. For instance, in this case, if I already know that this text is talking about freedom and habits, I can select those two and hide them from the graph, so I can recalculate metrics for the whole graph, for the whole underlying knowledge graph, and see what are the topics that are hiding underneath. And I can do it in a few iterations. So for example, if I want to also get rid of this, I will click that, and remove it step by step so I can uncover more and more latent topics underneath. And in fact, you have a button here that does it automatically for you. So you can press it a few times and gradually you will get to the topics that no other system would tell you about because they're hiding underneath all of those main ideas. So for example, here I'm getting to the philosophical paradoxes and conscious truths and transcendent awareness. So as you can see, it's quite interesting how you can get to the latent topics very quickly by slicing off the top layer of text and getting to the ideas which are hiding underneath. And then when you want to get them back, you just click this button here, and then it returns everything back in the graph and you have your original text shown here. So once we build a graph from a text like this, we can identify very clearly what are the main terms inside. So these are the nodes or the concepts that have the highest influence. And we identify the influence by looking for the concepts that connect the most diverse set of topics together. These are like meaning crossroads. So for example, in this text, which I wrote myself for my blog, polysingularity.com, that I will link to in the description to this video, I'm talking about freedom and habits, as you can see, because these are the two concepts that connect the most ideas together. And let me tell you why it's different also from just using any AI system to identify the main ideas inside. Like if you put it into ChatGPT, for example, that same text, it'll just give you some generic insights and you will also not be able to touch it yourself. And what InfraNodus allows you to do is to actually have a tangible experience of any text, so you can also use this thing that we have as humans, which is pattern recognition, right? And to see what are the main ideas, how they connect to one another, what are the relations between them, what are some hidden clusters that maybe you wouldn't have thought of or that AI would not normally identify. So you have this graph as a tool to read the text in a non-linear way by pointing your attention to the parts of the discourse that are interesting and also to identify the gaps. So once we see the main ideas like that shown bigger on the graph, right? So the bigger they are, the more important they are. Then we also see the main topics inside, which we can also give names to using the AI, right? So we see that this text, for example, is about freedom dynamics, habitual patterns, emotional resistance, and bold actions, right? So we can see the main topics, we can see the main ideas. So we have sort of high-level view with the topics and low-level view with the main ideas. We can then go to the blind spots and ask InfraNodus to identify the gaps. So what are the topics that could be better connected? And this is how we would generate new ideas, by linking those topics that are not yet connected. So for example, here it shows us there's a gap between emotional resistance and bold actions in this text. So how could you connect them together? You can also ask it to show another gap, and we'll see here there's a gap between freedom dynamics and bold actions. So we can also think of an idea to connect those two topics together. And we can either think of those ideas ourselves, or we can also use the built-in AI to generate insight questions that would link those gaps. So here I click on an insight question, and then it proposes me to think of the connection. How does the act of protest, influenced by anti-establishment sentiments among affluent youth, reflect the philosophical paradox of seeking freedom through transcendence, yet inadvertently reinforcing societal habits, as discussed by thinkers like Foucault, Sartre, and Krishnamurti? So as you can see, it's pretty interesting because it asks a very deep question that might not have a direct answer. And this is exactly because it's focusing on the gap between the topics that I talked about in this text, but that I didn't connect yet. And I can either think of the answer to this question myself, or I can ask the built-in AI to generate an answer. So there I click on elaborate, and I tell it elaborate on the statement, and I will go into chat mode, so it's a bit more open-minded. If I wanted a business idea, for example, I would click ideate, but I'll click chat, and then this is how it will generate an answer to that and come up with a response that might be relevant to this gap, and that might bridge this gap actually in an interesting way. So this is kind of it in a nutshell, how it works. And if you would like to try it out, I invite you to actually upload your own text, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. In fact, InfraNodus has a main version, which is this 2D version that you can see right now on the screen, and it also has a 3D version that is available via an extension, and gradually it's going to be rolled out to the main version as well. So in the 3D graph, you have a slightly simpler interface where you can use it on any text inside your browser, or you can also use it with Obsidian, an app which is like a very good note-taking app where you can also load external plugins like here. So as you can see, you also have a visualization here in Obsidian. And it kind of works in the same way. It shows you the main ideas, they're bigger on the graph. It shows you the main topics. So for example, here we see that this text is talking about habitual environment, desired dynamics, motivated experience. And then also it has this tab with the main concepts where you can see the main ideas. Also, if you click here, you see the main relations in the text, which can be interesting, for example, if you're thinking about a search optimization strategy. And you can also see the gaps here, so which topics could be better connected. And in the same way as in the main version of InfraNodus, you can generate research questions based on that. So here I click on the gap, and then I generate a question, and then if I want an answer, I send it to chat and ask the system to provide the answer for me. So this is how it would work in a 3D version. And to add the text is very simple. You just go to the apps inside InfraNodus, or if you use Obsidian, you would just create a new page, and then you add a new text. So here I'm just gonna paste this text into the system here, find a new name for this graph, click next, and in just a few seconds it's going to be visualized for me. In the same way inside Obsidian, I'm gonna add a text, and then I can either right click on that text and then click open an InfraNodus graph, or use this button here, which will visualize it in a side panel. You will probably need to open the side panel if you don't have it open already. So this is how it would work to visualize the text. And then you run this analysis, which I described. You look at the main ideas, the main topics, and gaps. And in fact, if you like, you have a text exploration workflow here on the right-hand side, which explains to you how to do that. So first of all, you import the text. This you did already, so you mark it as complete. Then it tells you, okay, now you can get like a visual summary of the main topics. So in fact, you also have this panel AI Insights here that gives you kind of like a summary of all the ideas and the main topics as well, right? And then you mark it as complete. So then you reveal the blind spots, which we've done here, and generate an interesting research question in connection to it, and then explore top concepts and topics, which is what I did at the beginning. Normally, if you just start to use InfraNodus, probably it's best to do it towards the end, right? So you can see the main ideas here, and then finally in that workflow, if you have some insights, you can always open this notes panel on the left and then add some ideas about the insights that you generated into your project notes, so that you can then share this with any other tool, or generate some new interesting ideas, or continue writing this text further. In my case, I actually want to write further. So what I would do to generate an insight and to help myself kind of come back to this text, I would highlight this gap and then look at the insight question here, try to generate something interesting. So I'm gonna actually let us generate a question here for this gap. So here it says, how can embracing unpredictability of breaking from societal and self-imposed habits, as seen as in protests or personal transcendence, enhance our understanding of true freedom and autonomy in a world where certain habits are essential for survival? And then I will click elaborate, generate a response to it. And if I like the idea, I can click save to notes. And then I'm gonna have this idea saved, and then when I come back to writing this text, I can review sort of the whole text itself and then add some more ideas which I haven't thought of before towards the end of the text, or maybe intersperse them inside. So this is how I would also apply it to writing. And one other really interesting use case of InfraNodus, and that's like a huge chunk of it actually, is that not only you can analyze existing texts or your own text, but you can also analyze Google search results, Twitter, also AI generated text. So for example, if you wanted to study a little bit the topic before starting to write about it, or if you want to, maybe you wrote something already and you want to promote it to the right audience, you can actually go to this tab, study a market and SEO analysis. And for example, as I'm writing about freedom, I'm going to type in freedom here, and then I will choose to see the informational demand. So that's what people are searching for when they search for freedom. And InfraNodus is going to automatically import Google search suggestions for this query and show me what else people search for when they search for freedom. So I understand a little bit their search intent, and maybe try to adjust also what I'm writing in order to reach the interests of the people who might be interested in freedom, right? And by the way, here you also have this exploration workflow on the top right that shows you how you can explore these ideas further. So it tells you to import stuff, then reveal the top keywords, which is what we see right now on the screen. So for example, we see that people are searching a lot for app, freedom app. So it's an app which is called freedom that might be not relevant to us. So we can actually remove this. And this is what you can do also with this graph, is that you can remove the terms that you don't find interesting and move on. Also, people search for movie, so we don't need this. Mortgage, that's interesting. So Freedom Mortgage, that's probably a brand of a bank or a company that does mortgages, so we remove that. And let's see, what is this? Freedom app. So it's all about this app, right? And we don't need this. We want to see what's hiding behind that. So game, download, online, let's get rid of all that. And gradually we will get to the stuff that might be relevant to us, because we're writing about freedom in general. So here we see that, okay, essay on the true meaning of freedom. So that's great. I understand now that people, when they search for freedom, they're searching for essays on this topic and also on the meaning of this topic. So I'm gonna write this into my ideas here. Essay on the true meaning of freedom, just to save this idea into my notes, and to then also add this here, essay on true meaning. When I continue writing this text, that I can kind of make sure that I'm using the same terms that people use when they search for something. And then in the same way as you can study the informational demand, you can also study the informational supply. So you can go to the market app and then type in freedom, and then you can ask it to show you what people actually find on Google when they search for freedom. So I'm gonna see the results right now, and it imports top 40 search results and visualizes them in this way. And you can then see, okay, so they're searching for home, equity. So let's actually remove this to see what's hiding behind it. Program, prison program. So it's something about also freedom in a very practical sense, like being free from prison, right? So as you can see, there's quite a different type of information than what people actually search for when they search for freedom. So that's also interesting for us to understand what they already find, and sometimes you can also focus on the gap between those two. So for example, I see there's a lot about prison here, but maybe that's not our topic. So we're bringing into this discourse maybe another point of view that connects freedom to habits. And this I don't see here. I will search for habits. There's nothing on habits. So yeah, we're bringing in something new to this discourse, and that's a good sign, because we know that if we talk about essay on the meaning of freedom, and if we bring this notion of habits, then we will probably come into the existing discourse in a way that hasn't been done yet, at least on big scale. So it doesn't show up in the top search results. And for us, it's a good sign. That means it kind of validates the idea that maybe this is an interesting topic to write about, because we're going to talk about things in the way that people don't really talk about, but at the same time, they're kind of searching for it. And you can actually do this comparison by clicking here, and then you can say, okay, how is this different from keywords that people search to find stuff? So when I do that, I see the difference. What's in the keywords that people search, but that they don't find. And here it shows you the connections between the words. So not only the words that they use, but rather the connections, right? You can also see here that, for instance, when people search for something, career freedom is something that they don't find, but this is also working for that. Okay, so that's interesting. It's because there is this brand that it shows these results, so we can get rid of that now. And that's going to be kind of something that you do over a few iterations because you want to get to the stuff that will be relevant for you. This is why it's so powerful to be able to remove those nodes. And here I'm going to also remove this and see, okay, so mortgage we don't need. But for example, now we get again to the meaning, true meaning, essay. And as you can see, once again, disconnectivity exists when people search for freedom, but they don't find it when they see the search results, which for us is a sign that this could be something really interesting that we should think about when we're writing about this topic, all right? So true meaning of freedom. This is something that we could add into our text that we're writing. So this is how you would use it. I showed you both how to write from scratch a new text or analyze an existing text with InfraNodus, how to also analyze Google search results and what people search for, so you understand a little bit better how it fits. You can also use the built-in AI to ideate on something from the very beginning. This might be interesting for somebody who already understands how InfraNodus works, but it's actually one of the most powerful use cases. This is why it's shown first on the apps page. And to do that, you click on the brainstorm ideas and explore topics, and then you start with a certain notion, like here, freedom, and I'm going to click to AI generated and live AI ideation. And then I'm going to click visualize, and what's going to happen is that InfraNodus will visualize just this node, and then it's going to suggest to me here what I should do next. So it says select the node freedom on the graph to learn more about using it and kind of develop this discourse further. So I select it, and then I click chat, and then it's going to generate some ideas that relate to freedom. So for example, here it says freedom acts as a bridge connecting autonomy, self-expression, and the unrestrained ability to choose one's path. So I'm going to save it to the graph. It's visualized, what I just added, it's visualized as a graph, and then I can deselect this node and see what else InfraNodus suggests me I can do, right? So for example, here it says you can think of the gap between those clusters, freedom of action, which is this pink one here, and choice empowerment. So what is the connection between them? As you can see, InfraNodus automatically directs my attention to the gaps between the topics. And this is how I'm going to develop this discourse. I'm going to click chat and see what else it generates. Here it says freedom by acting as a bridge connects autonomy through self-expression and unrestrained ability, enabling the choice of one's path in an interconnected dance of liberation and determination. That's a pretty interesting idea. It's kind of like really connecting this idea of freedom and choice and how you can make a choice and choose your own path. So I'm going to add this, and it bridges those topics, recalculates everything, and then we move on. As you can see now, it's proposing to think of a gap between this yellow cluster, liberated gap, and the second one, autonomy. You see those two clusters are not connected, so InfraNodus is always guiding you to bridge those gaps if your discourse is dispersed, and if it's too interconnected, it's going to guide you to explore beyond the periphery. So this is kind of like the special approach or the algorithm that it has. It's not only focusing on the gaps. If your text is too interconnected, if your ideas are all referring to each other, probably you'll reach some interesting results if you go beyond the periphery. And this is where it's going to be interesting for you also to explore. So here it's proposing a statement that connects those two topics, autonomy and liberated path. It says autonomy empowered by the bridge of freedom connects and acts as a conduit for unrestrained expression and ability. This dynamic interplay enables an interconnected dance of liberation and determination, where choice orchestrates the path of both acting autonomously and connecting freely. Very philosophical statement, but very interesting because you see it connects those two clusters, and then we move on, and then it provides us some more advice on what we could do next to develop this discourse further in this coherent way, where if it sees gaps, it will try to bridge them. If the text becomes too interconnected, it's going to look beyond the periphery. So this is kind of like how you can ideate with it using this AI module. And then once you generated a few ideas, you can also click on some of them, like for instance here, interconnected choice and autonomy, bridge, and ability, for example, right? So I connect those ideas and I would like them to be linked with some notion. So I'm gonna ask the AI to generate a question that would link those ideas. So I click on question, and here it's proposing me something that would connect those ideas together. So it's kind of nice because you can use this not to generate ideas for you, but to rather generate some interesting questions for you to explore something. So here it says, how does the concept of freedom as a bridge enhance the interplay between autonomy and ability, empowering individuals to make interconnected choices that define their path of liberation and determination? A philosophical question, but it's interesting because it tells us that there is something about being able to act on your own, so this notion of autonomy, and also this notion of interconnectedness with other individuals. So what is kind of like the right balance? Because we need to connect to others in order to evolve in life, but we also need to be able to make our own choices. And that's like a very interesting question that we can explore further. So as you can see, you can also use the graph manually to direct yourself to think of the connections between different topics that you might find interesting. So this is how you would use it if you want to ideate in this kind of iterative flow using the graph and the built-in AI modules. Try it out on InfraNodus.com, and also please let me know if you have any questions in the comments to this video, and please subscribe to this channel so that this video can get recommended to other people interested in the same stuff. Thank you.